Bioshock takes place after a utopia of sorts has fallen into the predictable let's start eating each other phase, then drops an unassuming protagonist into this now dead paradise where the only inhabitants are raving lunatics and people who have read Atlas Shrugged one too many times, driven mad by questionable medical practices and even more questionable political beliefs, and a handful of people who are still normal but are sure to keep a pane of glass between you and themselves. Having now experienced the same conditions in reality, I suppose Bioshock has lost some of the old magic. Everything just sort of makes logical sense to me now that I know this game was a prophetic vision of the future just a scant decade away from its release. But living with that existential crisis is a small sacrifice for one of the few games I can describe as being a well-performed stage trick. But like all stage magic, it relies on distracting you with a nice pair of tits so you don't notice all the sleight of hand techniques used to pull it off. The tits in this metaphor would be the incredible atmosphere you motorboat from beginning to end, clouding your mind from critical thinking while blocking your vision from noticing the holes in the plot. This may sound like criticism, but honestly it's the best way to go about writing a game. Too often games pretend to be movies in my opinion, full of characters that act like they're in a movie, and even play like movies with scripted set pieces which are just cutscenes where the QuickTime prompts are hidden from you. Seldom do you come across a game that explores what it actually means to be a video game, and do so with a confidence that you'll get what it wants to tell you when the moment arrives. Some of the best video game plots ever written were little more than simply dropping a man into a dangerous tourist location, and letting him figure things out on his own while every person he meets is far more interesting and well-defined than himself, until the end when it's revealed that he had more of a reason for being here than you first thought. Bioshock doesn't quite reach the lofty heights of Silent Hill 2 or Half-Life 2, but what does these days? That's why all the mean things I'm about to say that trash Bioshock are still done with a bit of respect, because I didn't notice any of the more poorly fleshed out details back when I originally played through it because my face was buried in a pair of perfumed tits.
They told me, son, you're special. You were born to do great things.
To properly explain why some things in the plot make no sense, I have to give away the big reveal early. Jack, being the project of mental brainwashing during his time in Rapture, was then sent to the US by Fontaine to await further orders. Jack finally received them in the form of a birthday gift, telling him not to open it until he had reached certain coordinates over the ocean. But nothing actually directed him to get on a plane and bring it down, and unless Jack had a sextant to check his position with the stars, I call bullshit on him knowing when they were over the exact coordinates. The big reveal later on that Jack is brainwashed and brought the plane down himself shouldn't be a big reveal to anyone but the player, since Jack should recall doing it, but doesn't since that would make him realize that he's being controlled. So they went with a lazy writing tactic of having the character black out and not remember anything that just happened. If the first step in your plan begins with ordering your most important pawn to get on a plane and crash it into the ocean, then your plan needs some minor tweaks, since you can't guarantee Jack would survive that, as evidenced by the fact that everyone else on board the plane died. Couldn't he have just chartered a boat instead? After surviving the plane crash and entering a lighthouse in the middle of the ocean, the same thing to do is of course hop into a bathysphere found inside it and take a trip down into the ocean even though you have literally zero reason to do so. The orders Jack received didn't even tell him to do this, he just figured why not. Someone needs to explain to me, or maybe I need to explain to them, how a projector works. They don't function like website pop-up ads like the one inside the Bathysphere, which appears in front of Jack's face from somewhere and plays a projected movie on it even though his face would be in front of the projector. And it should be noted there is no screen or projector to be found inside this Bathysphere after this moment ends.
Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone.
Bioshock sets about telling the story that anyone who had an impressionable roommate in college in search of a political identity was well aware of, that Ayn Rand's ideology was bullshit and doomed to fail.
I chose Rapture.
Entering the Bathysphere and experiencing the ride down to Rapture is one of those scene-setting moments I place alongside Half-Life's monorail ride, mainly because they held it down and ripped it off, but I won't fault them for copying something that works. It's just a shame that the entire experience is a great big lie. It's damn near magical to see underwater skyscrapers lit up in neon from the window of your submersible, filling your imagination with all the creative environments you're about to explore in this underwater metropolis. Then the ride's over and you're funneled into 12 hours of corridors and rooms that are about as city-like as the International Space Station. This is where I admit Bioshock Infinite did a lot better job at realizing a fantastical city setting than the first game did. There's no believable way Rapture could ever function as a city. Simply traveling from one district to another would be enough of a hassle to turn every area into an enclave, since every location is only accessible through bathyspheres that hold one person at a time, meaning going anywhere would have taken days of planning to work out the optimum route for low traffic hours. Rapture is one of those fictional locales that's at its best when you don't ask the obvious questions about how it functions. For instance, how does it deal with seawater corrosion, or the 200 or so bars of atmospheric pressure it's under at all times, or why there was so much effort put into designing billboards and Art Deco exteriors in an environment where everyone has to stay inside pressurized chambers or die. There's not even a point to building skyscrapers underwater. We build skyscrapers on land due to limited space in cities. No such problem exists at the bottom of the ocean. You'd have a hard time getting shortwave radios to work in Rapture where you have a lot of saltwater ocean between you. The Bathysphere dock is littered with protest signs made by people who wanted to leave Rapture but were barred from doing so by Andrew Ryan, which makes sense considering the city fell into civil war. But what doesn't make any sense is what everyone was planning to do once they reached the surface. There's nothing up there but a lighthouse with no supplies and no boat for getting to land. Like every element of Bioshock's gameplay, all of it is a throwback to System Shock 2, and most of it makes a smooth transition while jettisoning the parts of System Shock that were annoying. But the one thing that was brought over that ruins any suspense while also throwing some big questions into the mix are the Vita chambers. They're the game's way of explaining respawning, but they remove any consequence from dying, since even if Jack was just drilled through the head by a Big Daddy, he still pops out of a chamber 5 feet away with all of his guns and equipment, and the enemy health bar is right where he left them. And as for how it affects the world building, I have to question the safety standards of a city where you need resurrection chambers in every restaurant. And as a society, I think solving death ranks a few tiers higher than genetic engineering, but everyone seemed more interested in finally making catgirls a reality than achieving immortality. But then again, the game does explain that only Andrew Ryan, or someone with his genetics, can use them, which I suppose means Ryan was being killed a lot if he demanded they be placed as numerously as fire hydrants throughout Rapture. It's a good thing later it's explained that Jack is actually a child in the body of a man. Otherwise, I might have to more closely examine why he would inject a needle full of an unknown substance he just stumbled upon without any concern for what it might do to him. Jack has quite a few childlike charms to him, in fact, since he'll stuff every piece of food he pulls out of a garbage bin or the pocket of a corpse right into his mouth, while simultaneously smoking an entire pack of cigarettes and drinking a bottle of vodka. This has become something of a running joke throughout the Bioshock franchise, and it could be fixed with a simple inventory system which System Shock had, but Bioshock nixed in favor of compulsion divergent main characters.
Steady now. Your genetic code is being rewritten.
You can throw the words genetics and stem cells around as much as you like, but there is no getting around the fact that plasmids are magic, unless you would like to point out which animal in nature can create fireballs at will. There also doesn't seem to be much utility with them other than doing some unkind things to your fellow man. It should be no surprise to anyone that Rapture fell to ruin when every genetic upgrade you can buy for yourself involves setting someone on fire, shooting bees, or brainwashing people. Even the passive plasmids are downright amusing, since half of them exist to make the user genetically predisposed to hacking vending machines, which you no doubt can see the flaw in when everything in Rapture, including plasmids, are bought from vending machines. But the game stops you from hacking plasmid vending machines for no other reason than they didn't think this through very much. The other half of Adam is Eve, which is the mana that powers plasmids. If plasmids work through genetic editing of your cells, why do I need to power them in such a way? I don't inject myself with a can of Red Bull to keep my heart going now, do I?
Listen, I've got a family. I need to get them out of here. But the splicers have cut me off from them. If you can reach them in Neptune's bounty, then maybe, just maybe, I know you must feel like the unluckiest man in the world right now, but you're the only hope I'll ever see my wife and child again.
There is absolutely zero reason for Atlas to feed this sob story about his family to Jack. Jack will do whatever he's told without question as long as you use the trigger phrase, "would you kindly?" But Atlas feels the need to put on a show for his assassin and sends Jack on a mission to save his family so he can get them all out of Rapture, when his real goal is killing Andrew Ryan.
Plasmids changed everything. They destroyed our bodies, our minds. We couldn't handle it. Best friends butchering one another. Babies strangled in cribs. The whole city went to hell.
Side effects that Jack will never have to deal with, by the way, despite him being one of the most spliced up people in Rapture by the end of the game.
So tell me, friend, which one of the bitches said to you, the KGB wolf or the CIA jackal?
Because the US or Soviet Union would infiltrate Rapture by crashing a plane into the ocean with the one survivor being their guy.
Farewell, or Cosmogonia.
Ryan sort of ruined his own trap by locking the splicers out of the room from Jack. You spend a lot of time hacking in Bioshock, which might be surprising since this game takes place before computers were ubiquitous. So instead, hacking consists of directing fluid from one outlet to another intake, which I'm pretty sure is how you'd hack a washing machine, not an automated gun turret or drone. And the hacking minigame is just a straight ripoff of Pipe Mania. It seems like the legacy of games from the 80s is to be nothing more than annoying hacking minigames in our AAA titles today. I burned this body in an incinerator and got a plasmid from it. Keep in mind, plasmids are genetic material, yet it survived the oven just fine and still worked.
Here! There is another. Use this. Free them from their torment.
Adam is the goop that comes from sea slugs that makes all the genetic splicing in Rapture possible, but with the destruction of the slugs, the only way to get it is by doing horrible things to Little Sisters, who recycle it from dead bodies they come across. Jack can either harvest the Adam inside the Little Sister, killing them in the process, or use the good ending plasmid Tinenbaum tosses him to save them from their fate, but receive less Adam. But in actuality, the difference in amount of Adam you receive is so negligible that there's no real benefit from harvesting young girls other than reminding you of the good times you used to have on Jeffrey Epstein's island. Believe me when I say this, but this script at one point was full of Jeffrey Epstein jokes due to how applicable they are to this situation. But I culled them down to just this one. You're welcome. For all of the importance Adam is given, it's really nothing more than currency used at plasmid vending machines. I'm not even sure where Jack squirts his goo into the machine to receive a plasmid. Adam is one of those plot elements that sound really intriguing, but an execution is just another number. Whether you harvest or save the little sisters determines which ending you receive, and as far as video game morality systems go, this is easily the most embarrassing one ever conceived. As if murdering just one innocent child and slurping up the goo that spills out doesn't put you on a list somewhere as long as you give the rest of them a lollipop and a pat on the head.
Listen to me, Boyle. You won't survive without the anecdotes. Things are carrying. Are you prepared to trade your life, the lives of my wife and child, for 10 pounds of Frankenstein?
Not that it matters due to Jack's brainwashing, but you'd think he'd raise some questions over Alice being so gung-ho over murdering children when his own goal is to rescue his family. Also, if Alice wants Jack to harvest little sisters for more Adam to increase his odds of succeeding, he could have just told him to with the trigger phrase.
I will make it to be worth your while. Somehow.
Tenenbaum up and leaves after giving Jack the good ending plasmid, and doesn't seem to care about waiting around to see if he takes her up on her offer and saves the little sister she leaves in the room with him.
Now, go get that camera, and then snapshots of those that crawls on the ceiling. Then I'll let you into the fisheries.
Before Peach will let Jack into Fontaine Fisheries, he wants Jack to retrieve a research camera and take some photos of spider splicers for him. Even Rapture has an OnlyFans, it seems. The research camera replaces the enemy research from System Shock 2, which was akin to a high school biology class that took a lot of time for little payoff. However, it was a system that made sense, whereas a film camera that somehow reads a genetic code of whatever it photographs is on the hard-to-believe end of spectrum. Still, finding out enemy weaknesses is nice. Turns out all of their weaknesses are bullets, which is good since Jack really only has guns at his disposal. Sure, it clarifies which ammo type to use, but when I face off against a Big Daddy wearing a diving suit, it wasn't much of a mystery if I should use armor-piercing rounds or anti-personnel. So the camera just grants permanent damage buffs against enemy types, and sometimes spits out brand new plasmids, which is another mechanic of it that makes no sense. Weapons can be upgraded at a handful of kiosks throughout the game, and I appreciate the fact that the upgrades visibly change the look of Jack's guns. I just wish some of the changes made a bit more sense. Mind telling me how gas cylinders and spinning gears make my shotgun any better?
You've had your fun, but enough is enough. If you press that button, you'll learn what it means to truly be my enemy.
Why would Ryan care so much about Jack pressing a specific button to open a door to the smuggler submarine? It's not like Alice reaching his family and leaving in a submarine is a problem for him.
Moira! Can you hear me in there, darling?
Alice cooked up this lie about his family being on the submarine to convince Jack to unassumingly go along with something he could have just easily forced him to do. But what was his plan after opening the sub and finding no one inside? Ryan blows it up and helpfully provides Alice with a new angle by means of getting revenge for the murder of his family. But he had no way of knowing Ryan was going to do that, and I have no idea why Ryan would go out of his way to destroy an empty submarine. Bioshock is short on jump scares, and this is a good thing. Relying on a creepy atmosphere is more effective anyway. But it does particularly like the one where it places something on a desk Jack needs, then spawns an enemy right behind him. They use it twice in this game, then reprise it again in Bioshock Infinite.
I'm no sort of botanist, but I think Ryan has just killed Arcadia. The man's put something foul into the air. Bottom of the ocean, Boyle. All the oxygen comes from the trees.
Ryan kills the trees in Arcadia Bay that are producing all the oxygen needed to breathe down here. Never mind the fact that a handful of trees would not produce enough oxygen for an entire city, and that they're surrounded by seawater, which can be broken down into hydrogen and oxygen to create breathable air, which is how submarines handle that issue. So Ryan went with the worst and least efficient option. But why did he have a system in place that killed the trees to begin with? That seems like a foreboding policy. Who builds a city they expect people to live in, then thinks they might need a way to suffocate those same people?
Damn city built to not let anyone out in the event of this kind of emergency. Either we get those trees back, or you're a permanent resident.
So during an emergency, the door's locked to prevent anyone from getting inside to fix the issue that would kill everyone. Ryan also kills a botanist Langford who is working on a way to bring plants back to life, using the same exact gas he killed the plants with, the same gas Jack would have breathed in when he killed the trees and yet was completely unaffected. If Ryan can just pump this gas into rooms and kill whomever he wants, why not do that to Jack instead of trying to slowly asphyxiate him?
I just need a bud of Rosa gallica to confirm my analysis. Distilled water, a bit of chlorophyll, and enzymes extracted from Apis mellifera. That's right, sweetheart. Honeybee spit.
There are times where the game tasks you with what amounts to a scavenger hunt before you can continue. Here Jack has to find the ingredients to the Lazarus Vector to restore the plants before he can leave.
It seems Julie's death didn't provide a clear enough lesson to you. Perhaps this will suffice.
Why not just gas the room Jack's in instead of sending splicers? It's the same one you gassed Langford to death in earlier.
Well done, lad. take a deep breath and enjoy it.
After applying the Lazarus Vector, the plants of Arcadia Bay come back to life. But what exactly is stopping Ryan from gassing them again? Before Senator Cohen will let Jack leave Fort Frolic, he wants him to find and photograph the bodies of his former protégés with his camera, so they can become part of his masterpiece. It's an interesting scenario, but in reality, this is just another scavenger hunt only for people.
Finally sent someone.
The Iceman froze Jack and posed him, and then somehow Jack thaws out even though he's in a freezer.
Well, if it isn't the long-lost Andrew Ryan. Come here, Tiger.
Imagine being haunted by your dead stripper of a mother in the club she used to work at, even watching her seduce your father into bed. The dead body of the woman who was Jack's mom is found on the bed in the back of the club, but it's a female splicer model that appears to have been killed recently instead of some time ago as she would have been after Ryan found out she had sold her baby to Fontaine. To get into Ryan's office, Jack has to construct an EMP bomb to disable the mag locks on the door blocking the way. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, couldn't he just cut these two power cables leading to said door and accomplish the same thing?
Rapture is coming back to life. Even now, can't you hear the breath returning to her lungs? The shops reopening, the schools humming with the thoughts of young minds. My city will live. My city will thrive.
I'm fairly certain Ryan could have brought Rapture back from the dead. He won the war against Fontaine and controlled all the splicers down here. Why he just sat in his office doing nothing for years instead of attempting to clean things up and convince new people to relocate to Rapture is beyond me.
A worm looks up and sees the face of God. But look around. It's a regular convention of worms in here. They all had mothers, fathers, people who loved them. They got married, got terrorized. What makes you think you're any different? I haven't chosen the spot for you on the wall yet. Let me know if you have a preference.
If there's one problem with radio-only villains, it's that all too often they are speaking into the void, due to the main character being mute. Where's the satisfaction of antagonizing someone over the radio if they never say anything back? I think I would get tired of coming up with prepared statements only to have them completely ignored. Building the EMP is another scavenger hunt meant to pad the runtime. Geothermal energy plants don't actually pump magma through pipes, since it would cool down and solidify. All they do is harness the heat generated by underground magma to boil water, then pass the steam through a turbine.
A season for all things. A time to live and a time to die. A time to build and a time to destroy. Come now, my child. There is one final thing to discuss.
Since Ryan is going to destroy the entire city with Jack in it, why even take the time to have a heart-to-heart since he would know that the genetic key in the computer in his office can halt the self-destruct sequence? So allowing Jack to kill him would stop the process.
Stop, would you kindly? Would you kindly? Powerful phrase. Familiar phrase.
Would you kindly? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch?
Sit, would you kindly? Stand, would you kindly? Run!
This is still one of the most powerful moments in a video game, and that's because video games don't like to purposely draw your attention to the fact that even in games that present you with choice, those choices are still nothing more than illusion and you have zero agency to decide anything on your own. All you can actually do is follow the orders given to you. Somehow Atlas figured Ryan would turn off the Vita chamber in his office so he wouldn't revive upon death. Lucky break, I guess.
Hurry now! Grab Ryan's genetic key! Now would you kindly put it in that goddamn machine?
I don't see why using Ryan's genetic keycard in the master computer to stop the self-destruct would also hand control of the city over to Fontaine.
It's time to end this little masquerade. There ain't no Atlas kid. Never was.
Ken Levine reused the twist from System Shock 2 that the person who's been guiding you over the radio the entire time was actually someone else. Except that unlike Shodan, an insane AI with a god complex, Fontaine is just a villainous Vin Diesel who isn't even a good replacement for Andrew Ryan.
Now, as soon as that machine finishes processing the genetic key you just fished off Ryan, I'm gonna run Rapture tits to toes.
Maybe you should yank Ryan's genetic keycard out of the slot before it finishes processing then. You have a mind-controlled puppet at your disposal who will do anything you tell him to. Why exactly do you need to kill him? And if you want him dead, you could order him to put a gun to his head and pull the trigger, instead of activating Ryan's office security, which you know by now he's gotten pretty good at avoiding. And in fact, the automated security being less effective against Jack due to having half of Ryan's DNA was the whole reason Fontaine picked him in the first place. Even if you've been harvesting little sisters throughout the game, they'll still save Jack and Tinenbaum will still help him.
While you sleep, I undo some of Fontaine's mental conditioning. His control is no longer complete, but he can still pull some very unpleasant strings.
Just like that, the brainwashing is gone and Jack is a free man. Now continue doing what you're told to do because that's just how a video game works. What was an incredible moment is made into a joke now that you're expected to keep playing the game after learning the truth. Since despite being free of Fontaine's brainwashing, Jack still has no agency and neither does the player. So that big reveal is now made irrelevant. It's one of the main reasons the final act of Bioshock is universally panned. That, and it's also kind of shit. Up until this point, Bioshock has been like eating a delicious 4-course meal, and then for dessert the waiter brings you a Butterfinger he let melt on his car's dashboard the previous evening.
Fun, kid. But now, go get stepped on by a big daddy. Would you kindly?
Fontaine is aware that Jack would resurrect inside a Vita chamber. He picked Jack because he was Ryan's illegitimate son, and his genetic link would allow him to use things everyone but Ryan was locked out of. And why didn't he try this back in Ryan's office?
Seems like Mother Goose has been playing around in your egg salad. If you won't dance to that tune, I got others. Code Yellow. I just told your brain to tell your heart to stop beating.
Fontaine can still order Jack's heart to slowly stop, and for whatever reason this will permanently kill him because Vita chambers can't revive someone who doesn't die to sudden trauma. So Jack's only choice is to find Suchong's office, because of course he would have an antidote to brainwashing there, like mental conditioning is some kind of poison you can counteract in the body. Fontaine could also presumably strand Jack in this section of the city by removing his access to the Bathyspheres and Vita chambers, which he only had due to being Ryan's illegitimate son and sharing half his DNA. But Fontaine controls Rapture now and presumably would now control these aspects as well.
I don't like this any more than you do, kid. But you gotta understand where I'm coming from. I got 12 years down here. Big investment. Man can't walk away from a long con like that.
What exactly is it that Fontaine wants to do now with control of Rapture? If Fontaine just wanted atoms so he could sell plasmids on the mainland, he could have done that anytime he wanted before his war with Ryan, since his company created and sold the plasmids at first and he ran the smuggling business in Rapture. And he would have a much harder time selling plasmids outside of Rapture, since countries have medical regulations, whereas Rapture was a completely unregulated market. Suchong was killed by a Big Daddy in an accident years ago, yet his corpse is fresh and the drill bit sticking out of him has steam coming out of it like it was recently used.
Never play a man for the short con when you can play him for the long one. Atlas is the longest con of all. Ryan wanted Frank Fontaine dead. I just gave him what he wanted. As Atlas, I got a new face, a clean record, and a fresh start. Now, it's time to take back Rapture.
Don't be so pleased.
Oh, Mrs. McClintock! What are you doing here?
Ryan somehow never learned that Fontaine was Atlas even when Fontaine left voice recordings lying around that detailed his plan to fake his death and go by a new identity.
That is step one of turning you into one of those disgusting big daddies. The only way to get through that door Fontaine went through is to have a little one open it for you. And they will only trust you if you look like, sound like, and even smell like one of those big stinking brutes.
Fontaine holds up at a tower inside Point Prometheus, and the only way to reach him is to cosplay as a Big Daddy so one of the little sisters will open the door for Jack, because they only trust someone who looks like a Big Daddy due to their mental conditioning. So remind me why they saved Jack back in Ryan's office, and then even open a door for Jack just like this one back in Tinenbaum's refuge when Jack looked nothing like a Big Daddy then.
Yes. Now this is a Big Daddy.
Why would Jack need to change his voice if he never speaks? Jack has to protect the little sisters as they go about harvesting Adam from corpses, which now draws splicers to your location as they stab the corpse, something that never occurred at any other time I watched them harvest Adam from the dead.
I really wound you up for that wife and child bit. Oh, me poor Moira! I me wee baby Patrick!
Had they not switched voice actors, Fontaine wouldn't have to do such a terrible impression of Atlas. For the finale, Fontaine spliced himself into the book cover of Atlas Shrugged. It's also a really bad boss fight.
Sent you topside. I called you back, showed you what you was capable of. Even that life you thought you had? That was something I dreamed up and had tattooed inside your head. Now, if you don't call that family, I know what is!
He really is a villainous Vin Diesel. Even if you've been harvesting every little sister you came across, they still save you at the end of the game by draining Fontaine of Adam. The good or bad ending is determined by whether you saved the little sisters or harvested them. So either you're the fake Mother Teresa that you learned about in high school who saved the poor children, or you're Jeffrey Epstein with access to nuclear weapons. Okay, so I kept one more Epstein joke. There's no boat to take you back to the mainland at this lighthouse. The canon ending should be they all die at sea. The good ending has Jack becoming the father to several little sisters and putting them all through college and dying of cancer. It's an incredibly bad ending made all the weirder by the fact that little sisters are actually older than Jack.
Would you kindly